Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 7 of the Comeback Collective. I'm your host, Rebecca Shaw, and I am really happy that you are joining us today. Today we're talking about support systems, what they are, what they're not, and how they have helped with my healing journey and are part of my comeback story. I'm going to share about how church life played a huge role in my comeback, as well as why I ended up staying in more than one abusive relationship due to lack of support, as well as the intentional steps that I'm going to be taking in the future, not only to continue to build my support system, but to make sure that my kids never deal with what I've gone through and have the support system that they need to not only survive life, but really thrive in life. I'm also going to talk about how I handle relationships that make me feel unsafe, friends who ended up being unsupportive, and the boundaries that I've had to put into place. So whether you're rebuilding from scratch or maybe you're thinking about kind of refining your circle, this episode is going to be for you. Before we get too much further into our episode, if you haven't heard, I wrote a romance novel. It is called Shattered and Free. You can get it on Amazon. I'll link it for you in the show notes. It's a quick read. Someone gave me the biggest compliment. They're like, it's the best beach book for the summer. So please order my book, get it on Amazon. I am going to be offering possibly like a Venmo signed copy option, so stay tuned for that on social media. That's where I will be announcing that. But in the meantime, you can get your copy of Shattered and Free on Amazon Prime in 2 days. I will eventually be coming out with an audiobook version and a Kindle version, but right now I'm trying to push the paper copy. So order your copy of Shattered and Free today. So what's funny is even like secular atheist psychologists, they will say you are the sum of the 5 people that you surround yourself with, right? So growing up, it was like, you are who your friends are. My parents are very, very particular of who I hung out with, but never really gave me any context as to why. The excuse is always like, well, we don't know their parents, which I understand. I get that now as a parent. I do find myself kind of joking with the parents at my kids' school of like, oh yeah, sure, I'll just like drop my son off with you. Like, I know you from school, but like, yeah, sure, I'll drop my kid off at your house and I'll go be with my other kid. And it's like, I joke with them and say, I have absolutely no idea what happens with my kid 3 days a week when he's at his dad's house. So I trust like every single parent at my kid's school more than my ex-husband. So anyway, with all that being said, I grew up with a very sheltered life. My parents, kind of picked my friends, didn't pick my friends, but it was always just like, oh, we don't know their parents or they don't go to church, right? Which, as a parent, I see why those two things are really important, but it wasn't really like explained to me very well, because I did get to a point in my adulthood where I looked back at all the people who stabbed me in the back, and I literally was like, now I get why my mom is only friends with women she goes to church with. Granted, I've been stabbed in the back by plenty of people that go to church, so I'm not saying that anyone's perfect. But anyway, I'm just kind of laying the foundation of kind of like the support system I grew up with as a child, or a lack of support system I had. I don't know. Unfortunately, my parents are like the last people I ever went to for things until probably when I got divorced and the affair happened. But even then, I didn't tell them for 18 months. I was like, I'm not going to tell my parents that my husband cheated on me unless we're going to get divorced. So they were the last to know. And there have been other situations where I reach out to them for support. This is no shade to my parents. I'm just kind of setting the foundation of like how I've ended up where I am. And again, they're just doing the best that they can. They did what their parents did. And my grandparents are great. I lived with one of them, lived with both of them for a while. But again, like so much has changed in the last like 30 years generation wise, that like my parents, my grandparents, they've never had to deal with like the BS that we are dealing with, that our kids generation is going to be dealing with. So with all that being said, I basically went through my adolescence, college, not really having a great support system. I was very involved in church, but the relationships that I had there were just all very surface level. It was kind of like, okay, what can we get out of Rebecca? What can she do for us? Like, I would help in kids ministry. I would help in production. I was always available. I'd always say yes. And it wasn't out of like a place of like, oh, I need to do all these things so that, I have a place in heaven, or like, I just enjoyed serving. Like my love language is like acts of service. So like I enjoy doing other things for other people. I enjoy seeing things that come all the way through. I enjoy seeing something planned, an event happening and going through. However, now the people that I do those things with, right? I'm like helping at VBS at my church with my pastor and his wife, but like they're my support system. Like when we're not serving together at church, if I have a problem, like I can call them up. Like when I found out a year ago that my ex-boyfriend like just found out he had a kid, literally the first phone call I made was to my pastor's wife. The first phone call. So my support system has changed a lot, and I'm so thankful. So thankful. And it's ever evolving. People are constantly like coming and going from my circle. I'm constantly like praying about who should be there, who shouldn't be there, or just like, Lord, like this person really is a blessing to me. Like I don't want to mess it up. Like I don't want anyone else to mess it up. Like help me out, keep them around at least for the season. So I think I've set the tone for what my support system was like growing up, heading into adulthood. And then I remember when I got married, it was like the biggest regret that I ever made. Like that first weekend, I was like, what did I do? I moved in, well actually he moved in with me, and I was like, I am in over my head. Like I would go to work, he'd be home all day for a couple of days because our schedules were opposite, and like I'd come back and like nothing was clean, nothing was put away, and just like there was no adulting going on in my household other than me, let's put it that way. And I just remember being like, I should have gone to my parents and been like, I made a mistake, like how do I undo this? But I was so like, oh, we met at church, he's a Christian, we just got married, my parents spent, 10 grand on a wedding. I'm always like, if I knew how much my divorce was going to cost, I would have annulled my $10,000 wedding. But my children are priceless, so that's obviously not the point, right? Wrong guy, right kids. Okay. Anyway, moving on. But what I'm getting at is I didn't have the support system even at my church. So if I didn't want to go to my parents and be like, oops, I just made a mistake, I didn't even have like pastors, friends, mentors, whatever, because I hate that word, the M word. My mentor. I cannot tell you how many times in my like Christian journey where I have had leaders, youth leaders, like try to push someone being my mentor on me. I'm like, no, that's supposed to be like an organic, like natural, like you just come together and like it just works out. I'm like, being paired up with someone, it's like someone like forcing me to like go on a dating app or like go on a blind date. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Okay, this next section, I'm going to compare kind of the two support systems that I had when I found out about my ex-husband having an affair and my ex-boyfriend living a double life. And y'all, I have had relationships with men that just didn't work out, and I have nothing bad to say about them. That's why I don't talk about them. Or it wasn't like super traumatizing, right? Like it was like just like a little, oh, oops, okay, lesson learned, right? So I'm constantly being roasted on social media of like, oh, well, no wonder you've let all these, like, no wonder guys have done this to you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there have been other guys. Not very many. Because I like to keep myself. This is me being like private in a box. My soul. I keep my soul to myself. But for the sake of the point that I'm trying to make, I'm going to compare just these two relationships that most of y'all already know about. So we have the ex-husband who had an affair with the ex-best friend, which was kind of the premise of this book. And then we have the whole like ex-boyfriend was living like a double, triple, quadruple life, right? So the difference between the two was when I initially found out, my window is open and there's someone setting off fireworks. So sorry if you hear that. So when I initially caught my ex-husband, ex-best friend having an affair, my support system was like our mutual group of friends. And I like was not ready yet to like tell anyone about what happened. Because finally when I told one of them, and she was like, I think 6, 7, 8 years older than me, kind of like my mom friend I looked up to. When I told her, hey, look, this is what they did, it was like she like pulled my head out of water and I could finally see clearly. She was like, I don't know how you stayed friends with this person. Like I will never let her around my family again. Like all this stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. But there was like just so much like, I don't even know if it was shame. I try to look back. I think I was just so traumatized that I didn't realize like really what was happening. Versus, fast forward to last fall, again, I knew that my ex-boyfriend was up to some shady shiznat, right? Things weren't adding up. A few months prior to that, he told me he had a kid. it was just like red flags galore. I was just like, I want to figure out what the problem is, because I just am compulsive like that. Compulsive? Is that the right word? Like, I need to know the answer sometimes I let it go, but I needed to know the answer. So anyway, so when I found out about him living a double life, all this stuff, already again had known he had found out about the kid, I had already brought like my church family into that whole situation of like, please pray for me, I'm heartbroken, I just found out this horrible news that my ex-boyfriend, you know, has this kid he suddenly didn't know about. We all know that's fake. Also, side note, I recently found out, like this week, that he has been telling people that we were never in a relationship. That's fine. I wish that you denying that we were together would erase everything. I wish. I wish. Anyway, so that was the main difference between those two relationships, was I had support with one, didn't have the same support with the other. But now, in between, leading up to it, I mean, I was with this guy for 3 years, right? And it's like, well, why didn't you leave sooner? And I always told people, because I didn't have a good support system. He was my support system. So it's hard when you're in like an abusive, toxic relationship and you know you shouldn't be with the person and they're horrible to you and they're just a horrible person. But then when they're not being horrible, they're your support. And I've literally gotten into conversations with my dad and my brother when I ask them for help and they like turn me down or just do whatever siblings and parents do. I'm always like, you're the reason I stayed in abusive relationships. And they hate hearing that. And I'm always like, sorry, it's what my therapist helped me discover. Like, I'm not trying to point the finger at you, but they do say that your nuclear family has a lot to do with the choices that you make, which again is why I'm trying to like instill in my children, like, come to me first, like, you're not going to be in trouble. Like, my daughter did something the other day and I was like, she took like the back of something off that was sticky and it wasn't sticky anymore, and I could tell, right, like I could see all these fingerprints all over it. So I'm like, hey, did you peel this off and touch it? No. I'm like, are you sure? Because it's probably not going to work now. And she's like, yeah, I did. And I said, okay, well, like, I need you to tell me. And she's like, I didn't want to get in trouble. I was like, you're not going to get in trouble for telling me the truth, you're going to get in trouble for lying. So anyway, trying to like reiterate that to my kids of like, I'm here for you, I'm your support system, I will go to bat for you, but you just have to like tell me what's wrong. So unfortunately, I didn't grow up in that type of a household. Again, no shade to my parents, they did the best they could and we're still really close, but I can identify why I have done the things I've done because of my past. So anyway, moving on. Sometimes I'm actually really surprised that I stuck around at church, but that's because I know that my relationship with Jesus and like being hurt by people at church is like two different things. Church, going to church is a building. It's just a building, and people over here hurt you, but like Jesus, he doesn't hurt you. So you can go to church and be with Jesus. I'm like drawing a little path. Anyway, I have notes, but sometimes I still feel like I'm all over the place with what I'm wanting to say. I think that's the hardest part about having a podcast, where I'm not having like dialogue with other people, but I'm just quite not sure yet about what having guests on the show is going to look like and all of that. One thing too that I found with support systems is you cannot have your entire support system be like one friend group. You have to have like multiple supports that are not associated with each other, because God forbid something happens or someone turns on someone, like you could go from having 5 close friends to having no one. So that's definitely one thing that I recommend, is that people are nasty, people are wild, people like team up with just whoever seems to be trendy that day, and you have to kind of like, don't put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to support. So I have had a handful of like female friendships like come and go, and whenever I look back on them and I'm like, wait, what happened? I realized like, oh, they weren't really there to support me. They were there because I supported them and they could get a lot from me. And then like, this probably is going to sound really conceited and you can eat me up in the comments, I don't care, but they want my life, which is wild, because I'm like, I'm a divorced single mom who used to live in an RV who now lives with her grandfather. Like, what about my life are you so jealous about? I don't know. But anyway, I'm finding that the friends who I've had to like let go, or something came up and it was like, it's like the situation couldn't get worked out, and it's not like we tried to work it out, it was just like very obvious, like one little thing, like an atomic bomb went off. And I'm always like, that just goes to show, like in the Bible it talks about like building your house on rocks versus building your house on sand. And anytime I have a friendship, I've had male and female friendships that just like, I was like, oh, our relationship was built on sand. There was absolutely nothing of substance to our relationship. The winds came, the rains came, and the flood washed it away. So that is one thing that I found, is you really have to make sure that your support system like is built on a firm foundation. A lot of times, firm foundation of Jesus. But you know what? I have some secular friendships that still have a really strong rooted foundation, and that's just because they're good people, I'm a good person, and we just have like a mutual understanding of like, I support you, you support me. And one thing that I failed to do in the past is like let someone show you their true character. So one of my girlfriends, she says that all the time, like just let them show their character. And she's so right, because you give someone enough time and like they can't keep up the facade. Now granted, I have had friendships where it was like, oh, love at first sight. Like I have a couple girlfriends where it's just like we never had to try to be good friends. Like it just happened. Like it just happened very naturally, happened very quickly. But at the same time, it's like, okay, 2 years later, 5 years later, like, yeah, we're still here. And you know, it's like every day you gotta let them show their true character. But also, like, we've just never done anything shitty to each other to have there be any question. I do start to get like a little leery anytime a female friendship starts to be like, oh, my wife. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not your wife. Don't use that word. Anytime anyone's like used that word for me, or like sister wife, like our friendship doesn't work out. I'm like, don't call me that. Don't call me that, because I'm a product of divorce, okay? It doesn't work out. Don't use the W word on me. So to sum up my support system before I move on to like what I'm going to do differently for my kids, I have a great support system now. It's filled with people from church that I really care about me. I have my girlfriends, I have my family, my mom, my dad, my brother. I'm like working with them and like helping them figure out like how to be human beings sometimes. Again, I love them, but like they're so sheltered. They haven't had anything like happen to them, which I'm glad. I'm so thankful. I'm like, let me take one for the team, because apparently I'm born for battle. And then, you know, I've got my therapist who I've been seeing for like 5 years, and she's so funny. She's always like, she doesn't follow me on any social media, and she's like, I can't wait one day to like see your content. And I was like, we're not, you're gonna be my therapist forever until you retire, so I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, and then just really like working on my inner circle, and even friendships now with like other families at school. After having a handful of like female friendships with like younger women who were like unattached, didn't have kids, like that, like those friendships didn't work out, and I gave them so much energy. I was like, I could be giving all of this energy to like the parents and the kids at my kids' school. Like we're gonna be in school together till 8th grade, so I'm like taking that energy that had been given to those women who like aren't in the picture anymore, and frankly didn't deserve all the time and energy I gave them, and giving that to my kids' school, volunteering, coaching, doing all that kind of stuff. So you know, your support system is going to change as you change, and you have to let it change. You have to let it go. You can't say like, oh, well, this person's been my best friend for 20 years. If they're not supporting you now in the season that you're in, like, you don't have to keep them. You don't have to keep them here. So let them go. It's okay. You will find someone else. So I'm very transparent with my children when it comes to my relationships and my friendships. You know, they'll say like, oh, how come we haven't seen so-and-so? And I'll be like, oh, you know, I'm not friends with them anymore. And, you know, I'll explain why, giving an unbiased opinion. If I did something wrong, I'll tell them like, hey, yeah, you know, I did this, or they did that, or we didn't handle, you know, whatever the case is. I try to be as transparent with them as possible. My kids are also, you know, very aware of my relationships. They know why my relationship with their dad ended. They know what he did. They're very aware of my relationship with my ex-boyfriend. When I found out, you know, when he first told me he had a kid, even though the kid had been in the picture the whole time, I told them about that because I didn't want them to think that like my behavior at the time had anything to do with anything they were doing. I was just being, very open with them. It was very interesting time now that I think about it. I remember having to literally have like the sex talk with like a 5 and 7-year-old because they were like, when was he married to so-and-so's mom? And I'm like, they're not. They were just screwing each other. So I had to like explain to my kids, like, not everyone's married, before you have babies, but like these are the consequences if you don't get married and then you have kids, and these are, whatever. So we went over all of that. So just making sure that my kids know like my failed friendships and my failed relationships and like what should have been done differently. And then knowing like who they can trust, which parents they can trust. Like, hey, if you don't feel like you can come to me about something, like I want you to feel like you can go to this person. But then also just reminding them like you can come to me and tell me anything. You're not going to get in trouble. I think that's the biggest concern is like kids are worried they're going to get in trouble. I'm like, no, you are going to get in trouble for like deliberately disobeying me. Doing something wrong on accident or learning or growing isn't a reason that I'm going to punish you. Granted, if you do something like against the law and the law wants to punish you, that's out of my hands. But I'm not going to punish my children for coming to me because they need help with something or they need support. Obviously, sometimes life just has like natural consequences, and I'm all for those. But my goal with my kids is to really reiterate to them, like, I'm your first front line of support. And with that being said, like, I will never put my kids in a position where like they don't have a place to live. So that was always the hardest thing, and that was part of the reason that I didn't leave my ex-husband sooner, was I didn't have a place to go. My parents didn't have enough room for me and my kids. At the time, sometimes I look back and I'm like, I should have just moved in with my grandparents 5 years ago, but there's a factor to that story that I can't talk about at the moment. So we'll circle back to that. So just always having a home where like my kids can always come back to. Like, I don't care if they're 24, 34, 44, like I will always have a place for my kids and then my kids to live. So that's one of the ways that like I will always support my kids, is by having a place that they can call home no matter what happens. And that's not like enabling them to like not be grown adults. Like, my daughter's like 6 going on 16. Like, I'm not concerned about my kids like not wanting to grow up. I know that if they stay home longer, then like that's just how it's meant to be. Another way that I will always support my kids is financially, but not saying like, oh, I'm always going to pay for them, because that's not what I want. I mean, I was financially independent at a very early age, but like setting my kids up to be able to be financially independent. So whether that's, getting their credit score started really young, or having like multiple businesses that they can work for me. So I was, again, no shade against my parents. They are just different generation, not entrepreneurs. But it was like, I got divorced and needed a job, and my parents didn't have a business I could work for, didn't have a rental I could even move into rent, and didn't have a place for me. And so I just want to do kind of the opposite for my kids. I want to always have something for them to fall back on. It's never going to be like their first line of like, oh, well, you can just work for me. Granted, I was having a conversation with my son the other day, and I was like, hey, like, I think you'd really like to like own your own business, be on your own schedule, because he really struggles with like sitting down at a desk and things like that. And so like having a desk job is not going to be for him. And he was like, oh, I don't really know. I don't really want to like own my own business. And I said, well, I'll have a business that you can work for. And he like loved the idea of like still being independent, but not having, obviously he's 8, right? So like a lot could change in the next like 10 to 12 years. But like starting to get having those conversations with them now of like, I'm never going to let you fail, so you can try whatever you want. And it's crazy because I've tried a lot of things as an entrepreneur, and most of them have like worked out. Usually if they don't work out, it's because I lose interest, not because it failed. And I'm always like, how? Because I've never had the support to be able to do that. I've never had like the financial support or, entrepreneurial parents to like fall back on for support. And again, that's just where I like owe everything to Jesus, because he is the number one support system. So Okay, with that being said, I'm gonna wrap it up. It is 10 o'clock. Y'all know it's past my bedtime. I took a nap today, so that's why I'm hanging out late. So I can't wait to get this episode live for you guys. Let me know in the comments what you think about support systems. Let me know if you have any requests for future episodes. If you know some of my story and you want to know a little bit more, I can talk a little bit more in depth here because I'm not, on like a time frame or anything like that. I also feel like sometimes I have to be careful of what I say because some of the people I'm talking about might try to use that against me, but I feel like there's probably a little... But if they're really going to sit through a 45-minute podcast episode, then more power to them. Okay, love you guys so much. Thank you for watching this week's episode of The Comeback Collective. Be sure to follow on all the platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube. There's The Comeback Collective podcast, and then there's my channel, which is The Real Rebecca with an underscore, spelled like the Bible. Okay, love you guys. Bye.